So, hi everyone, many thanks for being online. My name is Antela Santos and I work at Health Action International, and I'm here with Peter Grabitz from University's Allied for Essential Medicines. So this is next in a series of webinars on pharmaceutical promotion that HI organizes, and today we're going to talk about what students can do to improve industry regulation on campus. And Peter can tell us a lot about this because he's been looking at policies on conflicts of interest in German medical schools, or the lack of policies on conflicts of interest, as we will hear in a bit. And he's also a very active member of the advocacy group UAEM, so he knows also a lot about advocacy. So thank you, Peter, for being here with us today, and I look forward to your presentation. So the floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Ansela. First of all, this is our first leap into the 21st century. If you can hear me well, I would love to have a thumbs up. Usually you can react on what we're doing. Great, I can see some thumbs up coming in. That's good enough. As Ansela already said, my name is Peter. I just graduated as a medical doctor in Berlin, Germany. And first, why conflict of interest? Why policies on conflict of interest? The first time I actually got in touch with the topic was during an elective where I was at a general practitioner, and a very well-dressed patient came in. She looked not sick at all, but super friendly. And after a short time, I realized, oh, it was a pharmaceutical representative. She was very kind, super nice. I felt flattered, and she left a whole bag of presents specifically for me. This didn't change much, at least in my head, until I went to the first scientific conference. There I saw my own professors giving talks, but they did it in a different way. First thing they did was they showed a conflict of interest slides. And for the first time, I knew who else they were working for. And when talking to a couple of my colleagues, we realized, hold on, every one of us almost got one or another thing from industry. And this is when we decided looking into this topic a bit more closely. Also, we're doing something very exciting. You can see the screen and you can see me at the same time, but you can also find the slides if the resolution is not good enough on a link that we're going to share with you in a bit. As Ansela said, I'm a member of University's Allied for Essential Medicines, which is a students network, and MEDCES, that is no free lunch group in Germany. Our agenda for the first about 15 to 20 minutes before we actually go into discussion is why does it even matter? Why does industry regulation on campus matter? What is the status quo? And finally, how can students change this status quo that exists? And this webinar is conceptualized mostly for students. And I am very curious to find out who of you is a student. For this, we tried something else from the 21st century. We're going to have a poll here for you. Give me a thumbs up if you can see this. So, well, you tell me who you are. I'm going to go ahead. We get back to the results in a bit. And tell you how our story in Germany went on. After realizing, okay, this is something a group of us has in common, we then looked at what does the data say, what does the literature say, and we found out that 88% of students at German medical schools have actually received a gift from a pharmaceutical company or attended a sponsored event at least once during their studies. Interestingly, if you'd asked the students, 65% of them in Germany or 85% of them in France did not feel well prepared for interaction with the pharmaceutical industry, and only 19% agreed to prohibit contacts between medical students and the pharmaceutical industry. We then wondered, okay, if this is the situation in Germany, how does it look globally? And the numbers are fairly similar. It's 40 to 100% of medical students, again, reported interacting with the pharmaceutical industry. And students turn out to be more approving of gifts to physicians or medical students than to government officials, meaning for government official, it's bribery. For the medical world, this is promotion and is better than doing it in a government position. To give you another example, there is data from France where there's a so-called Sunshine Act, and industry has to report how much they give to students, but also doctors and residents. And in the years 2012 to 2014, students received 1.18 million in gifts from the industry. That compares a bit with what residents get. However, it's only a mere percentage, like 1% roughly, of what doctors get. This is sort of surprising because studies have also found that during your studies, around 6 years of your studies, your opinion on the industry will be determined. Meaning, if by the end of your studies you're very favorable of industry, you probably stay it. Also, just to inform you, I'm closing this poll now. And publish the results. I think we hit our target group. 71% of you are students, and 1/3 are doctors. How cool. Great to have you all on board. The next question, to kind of keep you engaged, who of you already received a gift from the industry? A gift could also be travels, it could anything really. There won't be a poll, but I would like to ask you to put it in the comments. While you're doing so, I'll share some data how it looks in Germany. There have been studies looking at what kind of gifts students get. And again, you're not supposed to be able to read this. It's very small, but you can look up the slides. Most of the gifts students got were non-educational gifts. These include cups, pens, all this kind of stuff. Educational gifts came second. Snacks, books, etc. Are also within what students usually get as presents. And as mentioned earlier, only 12.1% of the students in Germany never received a gift from the industry during their studies. This is even smaller, and you're again not supposed to be able to read this. However, what this slide shows you is the results of an interesting review from 2011 that looked at all available studies on the attitude of students towards the pharmaceutical industry. And what you can see here is that the exposure to industry grows over time you study. So while in the first year of your studies, you're not likely, or the likelihood of interacting with the industry is smaller than in your clinical years of studies. So during the final year, students are the most likely to interact with the industry and receive gifts. Okay, there's an interesting phenomenon, and then we'll move on soon. It's called a blind spot. Medical students suspect their peers to be susceptible to industry marketing practices approximately twice as often as themselves. So I myself, it doesn't affect my prescribing if I get a gift or not. However, all my peers, they are very susceptible to this. This is particularly dangerous because those who not acknowledge the power of gifts are the most vulnerable because simply their defense is down. 13 to 69% of students were reported as believing that gifts from industry influence prescribing. However, 90%, so almost all of them, reported that dealing with pharmaceutical promotion was never addressed during their lectures. So just to recall this, almost all students interact with the industry, but almost none of them get educated about this or feel ready to interact with the industry. One last number I want to share with you before we go to the next part. Almost 60% of students had actually handed a gift from a drug company by the physician they were working with. So it was passed on to them, which I find particularly interesting. Also, in fact, there is evidence that gift policies and restrictive gift policies work. There was a study that, that looked at prescribing behaviors of two cohorts, with one cohort having studied at an institution with a restrictive policy and the other one not at a restrictive policy. And they looked at psychotropic medications that didn't have an additional benefit. And a restrictive gift policy during medical school was associated with reduced prescribing of 2 of the 3 newly introduced psychotropic medications. So yes, policies do work. Let's quickly look at the status quo. What do universities do about it just now? In Norway in 2005, medical schools stopped allowing industry-sponsored events on campuses entirely. In Germany, however, and you realize by now I have a bias being German myself, I talk a lot about the situation in Germany, 73% of deans had no interest in developing a policy. In France, pretty similar, no medical school had a written conflict of interest policy as of January 2017. However, there was a France-wide so-called ethical charter on conflict of interest introduced in November 2017, so the same year. Something must have happened between January 2017 and November. And let me tell you what this was. In fact, Pharma, which is an NGO based in France, published a study where they ranked conflict of interest policies at all French medical schools. It turned out there were barely any. This was then picked up by Le Monde, which is one of the biggest nationwide French newspapers. They made a story out of it, and public pressure grew so high that the Dean's Conference had to publish a so-called ethical and deontological charter that would regulate also, amongst other things, conflict of interest on campuses. And again, you can look up this comic in the slides that we shared earlier. It basically says to vaccinate the future doctors against the influence of the pharmaceutical industry, we take an electroshock from Pharma. And it's basically the deans that then shrugged back, and it really changed the status quo in France. This is nothing new, to be very honest with you. In the US, the American Medical Student Associations has done this since 2007. And in the very beginning, only 5% of US universities achieved an A. An A means that at least half of the criteria they rated were rated as excellent. In 2016, 2/3 of the US universities achieved an A or a B. So there was a significant change over the years of constantly ranking and holding the universities accountable. So the next thing I want to do in the last couple of minutes before we go to the actual important part, which is discussing and having your questions coming in, I want to go through how to kick off a ranking in 7 easy steps. Because from our own experience in Germany, we went, that's exactly what we did. We decided, okay, if France can do it, if the US has been doing it for a while, Canada as well, then okay, let's try it in Germany. First, we developed and adopted our own criteria, and thanks for this thumbs up, I could see it. And within our criteria, I just named them here. There are 13 of them, just to point towards a few. We looked at gifts from industry, meals from industry, consulting relationships, industry-funded speaking, education activities like continuous medical education lectures. We looked at ghostwriting and policies on ghostwriting, on industry sales representatives, most importantly, disclosure. So is a conflict of interest disclosed, and is there a policy on disclosing conflicts of interest? And finally, what does the curriculum look like? Also, a policy only works if it is enforced as well. So we had this as another criteria. Down here, again, I know it's too small to see it on the screen here, but you can look it up in the slides. We just give you an overview of the criteria that were used in Canada, France, and the US, and what we finally decided on. As a second step, you need to create a code book. You need to come up with good criteria. and you need to make sure before you start the study that you know what you're ranking and how you're putting this into perspective. We gave 0 to 2 points. 0 points for each criteria would be no policy or a policy that simply sucks. 2 points would be an ideal policy. That means X criteria that has to be determined, and the 1 is somewhere in between, policy that means the minimum criteria. Here we're just, I'm just showing you for the example of gifts, how this looked like. First question, is there a policy concerning gifts from industry? If there's not, it's 0 points. If yes, there is, and it's a policy that prohibits any kind of gifts, you get a full score, it's 2 points. If it does, if the policy allows gifts that have a value less than 20 euro, we would rate it as 1 point. And if gifts worth more than 20 euros are allowed, it sucks, and we would also give 0 points. Now, let me quickly summarize our steps 3 till 7. Next thing we did is we searched the web. We basically went on every web page of a medical school, and we looked if they had any conflict of interest policy or anything related available. Then we contacted the deans and the dean's offices at all the medical schools, first by letter, then by an email, then by another email, then by another email and a letter of support. This actually takes quite a while because medical schools are not easy to reach, especially when it's about something they don't really have on the radar. At some stage, you need to cut it off and be like, okay, guys, if you don't reply, it's our data cut off. You're not going to be in the ranking. And this is when you start rating the schools based on the findings you have. This is pretty much where we are in Germany right now. Then you put your hands together, publish a scientific paper, and then the most important part is campaigning, getting students together, and holding your schools accountable. This is a sneak peek. As you know, we didn't publish the results yet. I can tell you what we figured out. In Germany, there's only one medical school that has a dedicated conflict of interest policy, and actually not a single school offered mandatory teaching on conflict of interest. So this slide basically serves to show you how, at least in Europe, this started with France in early January, or in January 2017, publishing a ranking. We now have different groups interested in this, both in Spain and Italy, in Germany, but also in Belgium and the Netherlands, which is not marked here. And I'm also very happy to tell you that the EMSA, the European Medical Students Association, is working on this topic. They just introduced or they will soon have a meeting in Heidelberg where they talk about transparency issues as well as conflict of interests and policies about it. We also have a representative of EMSA here with us right now, and you can write a question to her in the comments and start a discussion there. Okay, you can also find us at interessenkonflikte.com. We're just trying to trick you here. It's a .com address that suggests internationality, but then it's the word for conflict of interest, which is German. It's Interessenkonflikte, so you get some German with it right away. So this is the point where the interesting part starts, which is a question and answer part. Please comment if you haven't done so yet, and we'll address all these comments together. We're going to poll you a bit more, but essentially, first thing, and I know that 70% of your students, you can get in touch either with us in Germany, and this is the email address you'll find there, or in France, and this is the email address to get in touch with the people who did the French ranking, if you have any hands-on questions. More importantly, we even created a shorted link for you to sign up for more information on how these rankings are going, for more information on what you as a student can do next, also for more information what we're going to do concerning the results we receive from all these rankings, how we can compare them. You'll be kept in the loop for future meetings that we're planning on this in the following months. You'll also receive more news about what other students' organizations are doing, including EMSA and the German one is called BVMD, which is also supporting our study in Germany. They're a partner. So the sign up would be right here, and it's exactly for you. Right. Since now we do have the time, I'd also like to thank a couple of people involved. This is first and foremost Hai, in whose headquarters we're standing right now. And I can tell you they work better than Facebook does. Then there's Metzis, who I mentioned earlier. It's a no-free lunch group in Germany that also highly supports the study. There's Pharma, the organization that supported the study in France, that is also huge support right now for our study. There's BVMD, which is the German Medical Students Association. And then there's UAEM as well. And the picture of all these nice people in the top corner, this is the team that did the study in Germany with me. And on the other side, you can also see where UAEM has chapters. So if you're a student based in any of these cities and you want to know more about them, you should Google UAEM and get in touch with someone at one of the chapters. Okay, so meanwhile we solved. We're doing we're hacking the system. It's a life hack.
Do we have some comments here?
We do have some comments. So thanks, Gabriel, first of all. He asked, did you think about merging both rankings, UAEM and AMSA, for your medical universities? Thanks, Gabriel. Yes, so when we came up with the ranking, we already thought, okay, let's make it as compatible as possible. The contexts usually vary. There are different laws in place, but you're totally right. This would be one of the next steps going ahead. Can we actually come up with very actionable best practice examples, or could we actually look at the policies that are available around the world and even do a meta ranking countries? But this is, as we say in German, music of the future. So it's not in planning right now, and I'll be happy to join on an email with you to explore opportunities. Then there's Björn, who asked, how exactly do Interessenkonflikte appear in our daily work as medics? How do the industrial interests affect the patients? Well, that's a great question. Thanks, Björn. First, and I'm not the only source. Since I just became a doctor, I might not know all about this. However, if you look at how doctors, for example, receive information, when you're at a university, your school subscribes for you to all sorts of different journals and medical journals. So you can access through the subscription fee your institution pays. You can access all the scientific information almost in real time. However, the moment you leave medical school and you're not affiliated with the university hospital anymore, there's no institution that pays for the access. And the way you usually get information is either through pharmaceutical representative, who may show you biased information, or through continuous medical education events. At this moment, in Germany at least, again, I'm talking from the German perspective, they are most often supported by the industry as well, because no doctor feels like, okay, I want to pay 80 euro for this when I can have it for free. So the simple way information flows always goes through, through industry glasses. There are other ways. One other way to touch upon would be the way additional incentives are given at universities. So universities themselves have very little, or they have restricted funding. So one way to improve their situation is get more third-party funding, which includes industry funding. And they incentivize you as a researcher and practitioner to get more third-party funding in. The more third-party funding you get in, the more additional incentivized money you'd get from your university. So there is a self-perpetuating system that that benefits those who actually get more third-party and also industrial funding in. These are just two aspects of it. I'm sure there are more. Jan, thanks Jan. Books, gadgets, resources regarding medicine, cities, books, food. Oh, so that's what you got. Wow, Jan, you would have ticked almost all these boxes. I'm particularly interested in what kind of CDs you got. Fair enough. Any other comments? Oh, yes. I think these were the main comments we received so far. And I see you're still not leaving me, which is good. There are two more polls I want to do with you now. Let's see if it comes up. So has this webinar improved your awareness of pharma promotion? There are three possible answers: no, somewhat, or yes. Please do take this poll now. And only if you take the poll, you'll get to see the results. While you're still replying to the questions here in the webinar, Juliana from France also came up with another question. How is the conflict of interest in unis related to the current for-profit research and development model? That's a good but also very wide question, because what I can see is there is a variety of ways this interacts. First, the idea that developing drugs for a market is something that, with all the different twists you can do to the system, that highly depends on general practitioners who are in the game as well. So let's say University Y wants to come up with a new drug for treating alopecia, men losing hair. It's not a very highly needed innovation, because there were already a lot of drugs for alopecia developed. However, they want to come up with a new one because they think, wow, the market needs that, and there is a market for it. So they would then team up with university departments and use also their resources to recruit patients, and they're more likely to recruit patients if they work closely together with the universities. And with doing so, as we just said earlier, universities also rely on third-party funding to a certain degree. They bind resources from them. Also, talking about it from an advocacy perspective, conflict of interest is something that a lot of medical students can relate to. We just learned that 90% of students have been in touch with the pharmaceutical industry during their studies. So it's a lot easier for us to talk to students about this topic, to come up with the little gifts they got, like CDs, like food, etc., to then talk about what else can be wrong with the system, rather than coming in and saying like, oh, what do you think about alternative approaches for R&D? So I believe it's a great topic to talk about the way commercialized research and development, especially on a publicly funded basis, looks like. Also, I'm now publishing the results. Let's see. We are, I hope you can see the results. Most of you thought this was helpful. That's good. Lucky me. One last question I have for you. Publish now. Following this webinar, here we go. Following this webinar, what potential do you think there is for students to be drivers of institutional change? This is a comment by Arsolia. Hi, Arsolia. As you mentioned, EMSA, which is the European Medical Students Association's policy paper on conflicts of interest in medical education settings will be voted upon by our members next month. And if accepted, we will work on an advocacy strategy to push for change of involving transparency in medical education as well as for academic institutions to adopt guidelines regulating their conflict of interest policies. What would you envision as a core of such a European level advocacy plan? That's a very good point and super easy question. What would you envision as a core of a European level advocacy plan? We know for a fact that this is a bit tricky because the situation across universities in Europe may be very different. The problem and the pharmaceutical research and development system is fairly the same. However, since health, and if you go to Brussels, you hear this all the time, health is a national capacity, so is education. And even in education, for example, in Germany, it's a federal system. So education then is regulated differently from county to county within Germany. So one caveat to keep in mind is that it would need to be adopted to the local setting. However, and I think this is the most important part, and part of the reason why we are doing this now for you and everyone out there, what we really need is coordinated action. You don't get far if it's another group of 3 students at the university feeling, why does my professor not show his conflicts of interest? But you do get a lot further if you can actually talk to all the other medical students who are out there. And this is why I'm so grateful for EMSA to put up a policy, if adopted, that allows for coordinated action and share our experience and actually speak with one voice. And I feel like with the studies we already started, there is the data and the evidence needed, it's generated, and to really make a change, what we need is coordinated action and campaigning together. So that's at the core for me. Luna also asked a question. Thanks, Luna. In France, since the implementation of the Dean's Convention, it seems to us that there's not much things done about it. How is it going on in your own country? Thanks, Luna. This is a very important point that I didn't even mention. So change happens on a number of levels. There has now been a high-level commitment by, in the example of France, by the Dean's Conference. Will it really change something on the spot for the students? Well, only students will know. And you do need a group of people to check up on the commitments made high up there. It helps because you can now point towards them. And Pharma in Depth has also raised this question. And they've recently published in January, I think it was, and we're happy to follow up with a link on this too, a ranking where they looked at the implementation of this of the charter that was published in November 2017. So how it works in my own country, we'll see. We're just now about to put our hats together, think through a proper campaign in Germany, and hope it will make as many waves as it did in France, or over the years even in the US. But what we found, and what really makes a difference, if you just look at the other countries who did a ranking before, there's Canada, there's Australia, there's France, France, and the US. Where something changed was in the US, and now, at least on a high level, in France. And this is where students were most involved. So I do highly believe that what's really needed to make a difference is the experience on the spot, and students advocating for change on their campus and holding their schools accountable. I'm also publishing the results now. I think you're done. And it's a great result. So I hope you can see it. All of you think it's a good potential. And the hearts are flowing. I like it. Great. So right now, and I see almost all of you are still online, we're going to post the link again for you to sign up to create exactly what we discussed before, coordinated action. There will be a lot more follow-up that comes after this, so please stay tuned. And what's left for me to say is a big thanks to the Hi team. Thanks to Alex, who did most of the promotional work and was a technician and idea giver. Thanks to Ancella, who I'm going to bring up on screen in a second too, who helped conceptualize all of this. Thanks for all the support from the team here. And thanks for those who did the study or who are doing the study with me in Germany.
Okay, so thanks, Peter, and thanks to UAEM, and thanks to all of you for following this webinar online. Super interesting. And please, sign up to the link that we sent, because we really want to get in touch with you and see how we can also do some coordinated action. And it would be really interesting to exchange information, to know more about who's doing what in different countries, how we can collaborate, find synergies to move this agenda forward amongst all of us. And stay tuned, because we will organize another webinar later in the year. And if we couldn't answer to all of your questions, I mean, we apologize, we have some problems with Facebook, but we will send you a reply via email. So thank you all, and Alex, you want to say bye?